The Pope's Final Message, a novella by P.J. Gott and Logan Light. Chapter 13. The House Beneath the Hill. Morning brought a sense of urgency. Pamela stood on the terrace overlooking the Tiber, a feather in her hand catching golden light. Lia emerged from the apartment holding a folded map. The Franciscan left us at our door. No note, just a location. Pamela opened it. The circle had been drawn around a hill northeast of Rome, just outside the old city walls. Beneath it, a single phrase, Domus sub Claulis, the house beneath the hill. It was nearing noon when they reached the site. The hill was overgrown, bordered by a crumbling monastery wall. A locked gate opened at Leah's touch. They descended a narrow path flanked by fig trees. Midway down, they came upon an arched, weathered entrance, carved with ancient Nasarene symbols, a vine, a lioness, and an 8-pointed star. Inside, torchlight flickered to life. They followed a corridor lined with frescoes of women in white robes, scrolls in their hands, standing before seated men. At the chamber's heart stood a stone dais. Upon it, an open scroll flanked by 2 silver feathers. Pamela stepped forward. This is a sanctuary, not a tomb. School. A woman entered from the shadows, elderly but bright-eyed. She bowed. You've come far, Pamela, and you, Lia. This place was once known as Beit Ha Orah, House of Light, the final haven of the Nasarene lineage. Pamela stepped closer. How do you know us? The woman smiled. Because your names were recorded. Transmissions foresaw your coming. The stories you found hidden beneath words, the feather, all part of the awakening. Leah's voice trembled. Then, this is not the end? The woman shook her head. It is the return. What was buried is rising. The house beneath the hill is the memory beneath the myth. She gestured to the scroll. Read it aloud. The voice must be heard again. And the daughter of light came to the garden, and she said, Rise, not as one, but as all who remember. The chamber echoed with silence that felt like song. And something old, something sacred, took root in the room once more. Chapter 14. The Hidden Crown. Following morning, Lia awoke to the sound of soft bells echoing from the monastery above the hill. Pamela was already seated at the small wooden desk near the window, the feather beside her, and the scroll opened across the grainy wood. Her fingers traced the ink. There's more, Pamela said without turning. The scroll changes when it's read aloud. It reveals what memory alone cannot. Leah stepped to her side. The text had indeed shifted. New lines now glowed faintly beneath the older ones. Not a translation, a revelation. She who bears the memory shall wear the crown not of gold but of knowing. Pamela looked up. This is the Magdalene's voice, not metaphor, record. A knock at the door. The elder woman from the sanctuary stood on the threshold. She held a bundle wrapped in faded linen. It is time, she said. They followed her back to the sanctuary beneath the hill, but this time the inner chamber had changed. A single candle burned above the dais. The scroll had been moved. In its place was a linen bundle. The woman stepped back as Pamela approached. This belonged to her. Pamela unfolded the cloth. Inside was a circlet woven of olive branches, amaranth, and silver thread. At its center a silver feather, long and finely wrought, each vein etched with such precision it seemed plucked from the wing of a divine bird. It caught the firelight and shimmered, like ice on a sacred flame. Pamela nodded. Goddess energy, she whispered. A feather forged of silver, light enough to float, strong enough to endure. Leah's eyes filled. The hidden crown. Pamela lifted it reverently. As she did, the chamber filled with a subtle vibration, neither sound nor wind, but presence. Not for display, the woman said gently, but for remembrance. Pamela placed the crown on the stone dais. The elder joined her, and together they began to chant. She who remembers the silence hears the voice that shaped the stars. She who walks with the forgotten carries the name that was never lost. The chamber walls pulsed faintly as if the stone itself had exhaled. Pamela turned to Lia. Now we know why they buried it. Because it was too powerful to kill, Lia said. They stood together before the hidden crown, not as scholars or seekers, but as keepers of what had waited to be found again. Chapter 15. The Flame That Waited. That evening they left the house beneath the hill for the last time. The sky over Rome had turned a deep rose gold hue. Shadows stretched long across the streets, and bells echoed distantly from ancient towers. Leah walked beside Pamela in silence, the weight of what they'd seen still settling into their bones. They returned to the same small chapel near the Tiber, where days earlier they had first whispered their intent to follow the feather's path. There a lone candle still burned in a niche behind the altar. Pamela sat in the front pew, her fingers laced, not in prayer, but in resolve. Leah stood behind her. I'm beginning to understand, Pamela said, why they created the drama, the rituals, the symbols. It wasn't just to protect the truth. It was the way to remember it. Leah lit another candle and placed it beside the first. Flame must be tended, even if it's hidden, especially then. Pamela smiled faintly. What if we did the same? Reenacted what was once living memory. Not for an audience, for the record. For those yet to remember. Leah stepped closer. Do you mean to become her? Pamela looked up. No, I mean to play her, as others once did, just as they played Jesus and the Magdalene, as a sacred act, not of theater, but of transmission. The candlelight flickered, between them and beyond. Leah nodded. Then we begin at dawn. The next morning they gathered their robes and notes and returned to the sanctuary. There, in the circle of the stone chamber, they began the first reenactment in nearly 16 centuries. Pamela stood at the center, her voice steady. And the daughter of light came to the garden, and she said, Rise, not as one, but as all who remember. Leah anointed her hands with the oil. She responded, As the Magdalene did, as the mother did, as we do now. Feather in hand, Pamela stepped forward. This is the light that waited. This is the flame that was never extinguished. This concludes chapters 13, 14, and 15. Join us next time for chapter 16, The Tablet of the Wind, and chapter 17, The Name That Was Buried.